Welcome to our deep dive into the chilling case of Rod Ferrell.
Rod Ferrell.
Yeah.
Okay.
The self-proclaimed vampire who committed a double murder back in 1996.
Wow.
Given your interest in true crime and psychology,
Yes.
this case is a fascinating, albeit a disturbing one to explore.
Right.
We'll be drawing from court records, news articles, and interviews.
Okay.
So be prepared for some heavy material as we unpack the facts and try to understand the complexities behind this crime.
Yeah, what strikes me most about this case is how it highlights the blurry lines between subcultures,
Right.
belief systems, and the real-world consequences when fantasy takes a dark turn.
Yeah, you're right. It's a chilling reminder of how these things can intersect.
It is.
So let's start with Rod Ferrell himself.
Okay.
He led this group of teenagers in Kentucky calling themselves the Vampire Clan.
Vampire Clan.
Yeah, and they weren't just playing dress up.
No.
There are reports of them engaging in rituals, even blood drinking.
It's crucial to understand that Ferrell's obsession with vampirism wasn't out of nowhere.
Right.
He was deeply into the role-playing game.
Oh.
Vampire. The Masquerade.
Okay.
Which his mother introduced him to.
Wow, his mother.
Yes.
That detail really changes the picture.
It does.
What kind of impact could a parent's involvement in such a subculture have on a teenager?
Right.
Especially considering his later actions.
It's certainly a significant factor.
Yeah.
His mother,
Huh?
Sandra Gibson, reportedly participated in some vampire-related activities with the group.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can imagine the influence that would have, especially given the impressionable age he was at.
Absolutely. It suggests a troubled upbringing with unusual influences.
Yes.
And tragically, this fascination with the occult led to devastating consequences.
Yes, it did.
On November 25th, 1996,
96.
Ferrell, along with Howard Scott Anderson, committed the murders of Richard and Naomi Ruth, Queen Wendorf, in Eustis, Florida.
The brutality of the crime is hard to grasp.
Yeah.
Richard Wendorf was likely asleep when attacked, beaten to death on his couch.
Oh my gosh.
Naomi Ruth suffered a similarly brutal end.
Wow.
Ferrell even claimed to have left burn marks in the shape of a V, his symbol on Richard's body.
That's a chilling detail.
It
It's hard to fathom the level of violence.
Yeah.
But what drove them to such a horrific act?
This is where the story takes a strange turn.
Okay.
The victims were the parents of Heather Wendorf,
Wendorf.
a friend of Ferrell's.
Okay.
The murders were planned.
Planned.
They intended to help Heather escape what she described as a terrible home life.
So they justified these murders as some sort of twisted rescue mission.
Yes,
That's a fascinating psychological aspect.
it is.
What does that tell us about their mindset and their perception of reality?
It speaks to a distorted sense of morality
Okay.
and perhaps a belief that they were operating outside conventional societal rules.
Right.
They may have seen themselves as vigilantes enacting justice in a way they believed was right, no matter how warped that perception was.
That's a chilling thought.
It is.
After the murders, they fled, right?
They-
This must have been a major manhunt across multiple states.
Indeed, it was a 4-state chase.
4 states?
One of the girls with them, Charity Kesey,
Kesey.
made a fateful call to her grandmother back in South Dakota.
Oh, wow.
She needed money,
Okay.
but her grandmother sensed something was wrong
Oh.
and contacted the police.
Wow. That's a close call for them.
Yeah,
How did the police manage to capture them?
through a bit of clever maneuvering. They tricked the group into going to a Howard Johnson's hotel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana,
Okay.
where they were finally apprehended.
That brings us to the legal battle.
Yes,
Ferrell pleaded guilty to 2 counts of felony murder.
he did.
But his lawyers argued for insanity, didn't they?
Yes,
They presented diagnoses of schizotypal personality disorder and Asperger's syndrome.
they did. They tried to build a case around diminished capacity, suggesting he wasn't fully in control of his actions.
Right.
There was even testimony about Ferrell experiencing hallucinations, seeing angels and demons.
Oh, wow. It sounds like a complex legal strategy.
It was.
What was the judge's reaction to this defense?
Despite the arguments, Judge Jerry T. Lockett sentenced Ferrell to death.
To death.
He was only 18,
18.
making him the youngest person on Florida's death row at the time.
Wow.
The judge acknowledged the psychological evaluations, but ultimately found Ferrell responsible for his actions.
What a difficult decision for the judge to make.
It was.
And the others involve Anderson, Kesey, and Cooper.
Yes.
What were their sentences?
Anderson convicted on the same charges as Ferrell initially received a life sentence.
Okay.
Kesey and Cooper, charged with lesser offenses related to the robbery and burglary,
Right.
received 10.5 and 17.5 years, respectively.
So it seemed like the case was closed, at least for a time.
Yes.
But the legal proceedings didn't end there, did they?
You're right, the story is far from over.
Okay.
In 2000, the Florida Supreme Court reduced Ferrell's sentence to life in prison.
Life in prison.
And more recently, in 2018, Anderson's sentence was reduced to 40 years, making him eligible for release in 2031.
It's incredible how this case continues to evolve, even after all these years.
It is.
So while we know about the crime and the legal outcomes, let's delve a bit deeper into Ferrell's background.
Okay.
His childhood was reportedly incredibly difficult.
Yes.
What specific details might shed light on his path to such darkness?
Ferrell was born to teenage parents in Kentucky,
Okay.
and his father left soon after to join the military.
Oh, wow.
He was raised mainly by his mother, Sandra Gibson,
Gibson?
and they moved frequently between Florida and Kentucky,
Yeah.
often struggling financially.
That paints a picture of instability and hardship from the very beginning.
Yes, it does.
Did Ferrell ever share any specific experiences that might have impacted his psychological development?
According to court records,
Okay.
Ferrell claimed to have been sexually abused by his grandfather at age 5.
Oh my God.
It's a horrifying accusation, and though part of the court record, it never led to any official charges.
That's heartbreaking.
It is.
To experience such trauma at such a young age. And we already know about his mother's deep involvement in the occult.
Yes.
Were there other aspects of her behavior that raised concerns?
There were definitely some disturbing elements, according to the Sun Sentinel.
Sensational.
She worked as an exotic dancer and sometimes engaged in sex work to support herself and her son.
Wow.
Perhaps most concerningly, she admitted to participating in vampirism herself.
Herself.
There are even reports of her writing to a 14-year-old member of the vampire clan,
Oh my God.
promising to be his bride for eternity.
This is unsettling.
It is.
Not only was Ferrell exposed to this dark subculture, but his own mother was encouraging it.
It creates a very troubling picture. And the judge, in Ferrell's case, seemed to recognize the impact of his mother's role.
Okay.
He's quoted as saying, "I think you are a very disturbed man. I think your family failed you,"
Wow.
even suggesting that Ferrell's mother should have faced trial herself.
That's a powerful statement from the judge.
It is.
So we see this pattern of neglect, abuse, and exposure to unhealthy behaviors from a young age.
We do.
It's hard not to wonder how this might have influenced Ferrell's descent into violence.
It's certainly a complex interplay of factors.
Yeah.
We need to consider his psychological development within this difficult environment.
Right.
For example, before the murders, Ferrell and his vampire clan were known to gather at an abandoned cement structure in the woods.
In the woods.
They called it Hotel California.
Hotel California in the woods.
Yes,
It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie.
it does.
What did they do there?
It's believed this is where they conducted their rituals,
Okay.
including blood drinking and other activities.
Right.
While not necessarily criminal, these activities show a group deeply immersed in a dark and potentially dangerous fantasy world.
So we have this isolated location, a group of troubled teenagers, and a charismatic leader with a disturbing obsession.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yes, and tragically that disaster unfolded in the most horrific way imaginable. Yes. It's a stark reminder of how vulnerable young minds can be, and how easily a distorted reality can lead to devastating consequences. But the story doesn't end there.
Right.
We've talked about his childhood, the crime, the legal outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
What about his life in prison?
Yeah.
Has he retained this vampire persona?
Right.
What about remorse for his actions?
That's a great question. It's hard to imagine someone capable of such brutality also having a normal side.
Right.
What does the research show?
Well, his prison life offers an interesting glimpse into his character.
Okay.
Records show that he's had numerous female visitors and pen pals.
Visitors and pen pals.
Some have even expressed a desire to marry him.
Marry him. That's surprising considering the nature of his crimes.
It is.
What kind of person would be drawn to someone like that?
It's a complex question that touches on the strange fascination some people have with notorious criminals.
Right.
One of his potential visitors even had a history of run-ins with the law herself, including charges for public intoxication and other minor offenses.
So it seems like she might have had her own struggles.
She did.
Did any of these relationships create issues for Ferrell in prison?
One in particular did.
One did.
Back in 2005, a female visitor sent him explicit photos, including one of them kissing and another with him touching her breast during a previous visit.
Oh, wow.
Prison officials discovered these photos, leading to a 2-year ban on her visitation rights.
That must have caused quite a stir. Did Ferrell have any reaction to this incident?
Yes, he did.
He did.
He wrote a letter pleading for the ban to be lifted.
Okay.
He claims they'd been together for over a year and had even applied to get married.
Wow.
In the letter, he presents himself as a changed man, encouraging her to attend church, avoid trouble, and behave responsibly.
Really?
He even admits to being naive about prison life and apologizes for the trouble his ignorance caused.
That's an interesting shift from the self-proclaimed vampire we've been discussing.
It is.
Do you think this was a genuine attempt at reform or just a manipulation to get his visitation privileges back?
It's difficult to say for certain. It's possible he's experiencing genuine remorse and seeking a different path. Or it could be a calculated attempt to manipulate the system.
Yeah.
We need more information to truly understand his motivations.
You bring up a good point. It's tough to know what's truly going on inside someone's mind, especially in a case like this.
Right.
Stepping back for a moment, you were mentioning this case garnered a lot of media attention back in the 90s.
It did.
What was it about the Rod Ferrell case that captivated the public's imagination so strongly?
You were following this case back then, weren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Imagine the media frenzy at the time. This wasn't just a double murder.
Right.
You had this group of teenagers seemingly inspired by Gothic subculture.
Right.
Engaging in rituals, talking about immortality.
Yeah.
It tapped into our primal fears and fascinations with the occult and became a national sensation.
I can only imagine it sounds like something straight out of a horror movie.
Yes.
This seemingly innocent group of teenagers dabbling in the occult rituals immortality, it really captured the public imagination. Why do you think these themes resonate so deeply with us?
There's a certain allure to the forbidden, the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Vampires, the occult. They represent a world outside our normal understanding, where different rules apply.
Right.
It's both terrifying and fascinating, and I think that duality is what draws people in.
That makes sense. It's like peering into a dark mirror, confronting our own fears and fascinations.
Right.
Did this media attention have any broader impact? Did it spark any societal discussions or concerns?
Absolutely. It fueled a lot of moral panic at the time.
More panic.
People were worried about this perceived rise of occult influence, especially among young people.
Oh, wow.
There were calls for stricter censorship on books, movies, even games like the one Ferrell was obsessed with.
That's a strong reaction. Do you think that level of concern was justified, or was it an overreaction to a sensationalized case?
It's understandable that people were frightened.
Yeah.
This case involved a brutal crime, and the vampire element added a layer of fear in the unknown. However, it's crucial to remember that this was an extreme case, and we should avoid generalizing entire subcultures based on the actions of a few disturbed individuals.
That's a valid point. It's about finding that balance between acknowledging potential risks and respecting individual freedoms and expressions.
Right.
Looking back, do you think the public discourse surrounding mental health and criminal behavior has evolved since this case?
I think we've made some progress.
Okay.
There's certainly more awareness now about the connection between mental illness and violence, but there's still a long way to go in terms of providing adequate resources and support for those struggling with mental health issues.
It seems like a lot of these tragic situations might be preventable with early intervention and support.
You're absolutely right. In Ferrell's case, there were so many red flags.
Red flags.
The abuse he allegedly endured, his mother's influence, his increasingly disturbing behavior.
Right.
These were all signs that something was deeply wrong.
Yeah.
Yet it seems no one was able to reach him or provide the help he desperately needed.
That's a heartbreaking realization looking back. It's easy to pinpoint these missed opportunities.
It is.
But in reality, cases like this often involve a complex web of factors.
They do.
Family dynamics, mental health, social influences.
Right.
It rarely presents a clear path for intervention.
Exactly. And it really underscores the need for a more holistic approach to addressing these issues.
Right.
We need better mental health services, stronger social safety nets, early intervention programs, and a greater understanding of the warning signs that often precede violent behavior.
You've highlighted the need for a multifaceted approach.
Yes.
But even with better systems in place, there will always be those who fall through the cracks, right?
There will.
It's a difficult reality to grapple with.
It is, and it brings us back to the core question that haunts many cases like this.
Okay.
Could this tragedy have been prevented?
Right.
It's a question without a definitive answer, but it's one we must continue to ask.
By asking that question, we force ourselves to examine the systems, the structures, the beliefs that might contribute to such tragedies. Yes.
It's about looking inward as much as outward, isn't it?
It is, and it compels us to think about what we can do differently, both individually and as a society.
Right.
What steps can we take to help ensure this cycle of violence and neglect doesn't repeat itself?
You're right. It's a question that goes beyond just this case. It challenges us to examine our own roles, our own beliefs, and our own capacity for empathy and action. It's a powerful challenge. It reminds us of the importance of fostering empathy and understanding,
Yes.
even in the face of darkness and violence.
It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone, even those who have committed terrible acts.
Right.
Trying to understand the why behind such horrific events can be unsettling, but it's crucial if we want to learn and hopefully prevent similar tragedies in the future.
Exactly. And in Ferrell's case, we're left with so many unanswered questions.
We are.
Was he truly under the sway of a delusional belief system?
Right.
Or was this a calculated act of violence?
Yeah.
It's a puzzle that continues to fascinate those who have studied this case. It really is a fascinating and frustrating puzzle.
Yeah.
It speaks to the broader mystery of the human heart, its capacity for both darkness and light,
Right.
for cruelty and compassion. It's something we might never fully understand, but we have to keep trying.
Well said. Before we wrap up, I wanted to share a quote from Judge Jerry T. Lockett, who presided over Ferrell's case.
Okay.
He said to Ferrell, "You have a strong personality. You are a leader, but you are a leader without a conscience."
Wow.
That quote has always stuck with me.
That's a chilling assessment.
It is.
It speaks to the duality of leadership. The power to influence others can be used for good or for terrible harm.
Right.
That's a powerful reminder for all of us, not just in the context of this case, but in our own lives.
Yeah.
What kind of leaders do we choose to follow? What kind of influence do we have on others?
Those are important questions to consider, and in Ferrell's case, it seems that power was twisted and corrupted,
It was.
leading to devastating consequences.
It certainly was. This deep dive has been a journey into some dark corners of the human psyche, but it's also been a reminder of the importance of hope resilience and the possibility of redemption.
Right.
It's essential to hold Ferrell accountable for his actions, but we also have to recognize the complexity of his story and the factors that may have shaped his path.
You're right. It's easy to see him as a monster, but it's important to remember that he was also a victim of circumstance, of neglect, of a deeply troubled upbringing.
Even in the darkest of cases, there's often more to the story than meets the eye. It's a reminder that simple explanations rarely capture the full truth.
Well, this deep dive has been a heavy one, but also incredibly thought-provoking. We've explored a horrific crime, the psychology of the perpetrator, the role of the media, and even touched upon broader societal issues.
Yes, we have.
So for our listener, if this has sparked your curiosity,
Yes.
there's a wealth of information out there on these topics. There are resources available on cults, true crime, and the psychology of criminal behavior.
And remember, approach these topics with an open mind, a critical eye, and a willingness to grapple with the complexities of human nature. Understanding the darkness is often the first step towards creating a brighter future.
Perfectly said. We'll leave you to ponder the echoes of this chilling tale. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.